Welcome to the Nagrik Podcast with Hari.
अप्रिशिएबल प्रोग्रेस हुआ है, चाहे इंफ्रा के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से रेलवेज हों, एयरपोर्ट्स हों या पोर्ट्स पे टर्न अराउंड टाइम हो, वो सारी चीज़ें आई थिंक इफेक्ट हुई हैं. इसका जो मीडियम टू लॉन्ग टर्म इफेक्ट है वो कब तक इकॉनमी पे आना स्टार्ट होगा? थ्रू कैपेक्स या थ्रू इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर स्पेंडिंग? बजट को आई थिंक 4 लाख करोड़ से लेके 11 लाख करोड़ तक लेके गई है जो सरकार, उसके इफेक्ट्स कब दिखने स्टार्ट होंगे इकॉनमी पे?
देखिए, अगर इसको आप 2014 से रिलेट करिए, जो मोदी गवर्नमेंट ने जब पहले टर्म में बहुत बड़ा काम किया गया था, व्हाट आई विल कॉल पर्सनल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर इम्प्रूवमेंट. राइट, हाउस होल्ड घर चाहिए, घर ठीक होना चाहिए, उसमें टॉयलेट होना चाहिए, राइट, कुकिंग का मीडियम होना चाहिए, बिजली होनी चाहिए, घर आना चाहिए. तो बहुत काम किया सरकार ने टू सैचुरेट के हिंदुस्तान के सभी लोगों को ये सुविधाएं, जो बेसिक सुविधाएं हैं, वो मिले. राइट, एंड आई थिंक उसके काफ़ी अच्छे परिणाम भी आए. लोगों में मोबिलिटी बढ़ी, लोगों की हेल्थ कंडीशंस में भी थोड़ा सुधार आया. राइट, के और स्टडीज़ के प्रति भी, एजुकेशन, ये चीज़ें भी थोड़ी उस कारण से मोबिलिटी सिटीज़ में, दूसरे स्टेट्स में वो बढ़ी. बिकॉज अगर आपका ये घर की ये चिंताएं, आप जो नॉर्मली आपकी चिंता नहीं होनी चाहिए, बिजली आएगी नहीं आएगी, खाना बनाने के लिए कुछ है या नहीं है, राइट. तो पर्सनल जो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर है, होम इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर शुरू से, उसमें बड़ा अप्रिशिएबल काम किया. एंड आई थिंक उसके परिणाम आने शुरू भी हो गए, पॉलिटिकल भी और नॉन पॉलिटिकल भी. राइट. दूसरे टर्म में आप फिजिकल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पे सरकार ने बहुत ज़्यादा ध्यान दिया. राइट, यू मेंशन के रेलवेज, रोड्स, मेट्रोस एंड थिंग्स लाइक दैट. राइट, दैट आई थिंक jury is still out whether that was very sensibly designed or not designed. Okay. Or part of it was very sensibly designed, part of it was not sensibly designed. Right. You mentioned railways. रेलवेज का क्या काम है? रेलवेज का काम ये है कि पैसेंजर और गुड्स का ट्रांसपोर्टेशन अच्छी स्पीड, कम एफिशिएंसी, बिना डैमेज वगैरह के हो. बिल्कुल. राइट, दैट इज व्हाट इट इज. राइट. सो अगर जितना भी इन्वेस्टमेंट आप करें, चाहे आप ट्रैक्स में करें, चाहे इलेक्ट्रिक कन्वर्शन में करें, चाहे आप बोगीज में करें, इंजन्स में करें, किसी पे भी करें, राइट, that should translate into कि आपके पैसेंजर्स बढ़े. राइट. आप more of Indians travel by road, by rails. Right. And more of the goods get transported by trains. Right. तभी आप कह सकते हैं वो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में जो इन्वेस्टमेंट हो रहा है, और काफ़ी इन्वेस्टमेंट हो रहा है इस साल का, अगर आप मिला लें तो पिछले 5 साल में तकरीबन 7-7.5 लाख करोड़ का इन्वेस्टमेंट सिर्फ रेलवेज में हुआ है. राइट. तो अब आप आंकड़े देखिए, पैसेंजर्स मूवमेंट इन 23-24 इज लेस देन 2018-19.
Interesting.
Why are people not traveling by trains? Except जैसे अभी जो कुंभ के समय ट्रेन्स में, या कभी छठ के समय, वो दूसरे इश्यूज हैं, वो एपिसोडिक ट्रैवल के अलावा. बट टोटल ट्रैवल इन ट्रेन्स, पैसेंजर ट्रैवल इज एक्चुअली डाउन. And I'm not talking of the COVID years or something. I'm talking of 23-24, which is an absolutely normal. And ये मेरे आंकड़े नहीं, ये रेलवेज के खुद के आंकड़े. Right. It's about 10% less than the 1920 travel by rails.
Is it because की roads या airport का combined effect with
There are a number of reasons for that. While there have been some improvement in elite trains like Vande Bharat, etc., bulk of the rail travel is still far less comfortable for people. Right. Then because we still don't have the right kind of consumer. Why do you still find the platforms sort of crowded so much? Why are people still sleeping on the platforms? Right. If you're making so much of investment. So from the perspective of passenger travel. And this is, in fact, a secular decline in the share of railways. Because, as you said, relatively, other modes of transport, by road, by cars, by buses even, by personal vehicle, has simply ballooned. Today, if you travel on highways, I come from Jaipur, spend a lot of time, you travel from Delhi to Jaipur, the roads are chock-a-block.
Right.
Because their vehicles are very comfortable relatively, roads are much better, and today the facilities across there are hundreds of eateries on the way today.
Right.
And what kind of food you get in the railways too.
Right.
Right. So all these add up. Look at the freight transport, goods transportation. There is a growth, unlike passengers where it has declined. So there is a growth, but that growth, cumulative growth, compounded growth, is lower than the road freight transport growth. So even there, the railways are relatively losing the share. So I find, and that's what I've argued at length in this new book, the dented one, that railways investment is not actually leading to corresponding gross value addition.
Right. इन्वेस्ट हम बहुत कर रहे हैं बट वो ट्रांसलेट नहीं
ट्रांसलेट नहीं हो रहा है आउटपुट में और ग्रॉस वैल्यू एडेड में.
राइट.
The road transportation investment is relatively much better because there is another factor in the railways. Railways is still completely 100% owned by Sarkar. Right. Whether it's tracks, trains, platforms,
zero
or whatever,
privatization.
there is zero privatization. So सरकारी कर्मचारी जितनी सर्विस देगा वो ऐसी सर्विस देगा. Right. So this is it's a business.
Right.
It's a service business, which is very sensitive to how the customers or the travelers perceive.
Right.
And if they don't get that kind of treatment, if they don't find the toilets clean, if they don't find the station experience is a pleasant experience, they will not travel.
Right.
Only if you are masboor, then you will travel there.
Right. And even recently, New Delhi में stampede भी हो.
So road correspondingly, since there is a lot of private element there, because the vehicular industry is in all private sector.
Right.
The road is built, which is good. So road investment you make, but then a lot of business is built on those roads. Right. So that is what is succeeding. But unfortunately, there the government seems to have developed some cold feet of making. So NHAI investment is very high. But this year, a very large sum of what is styled as capital investment is actually being used for repaying the NHI debt. So if you repay old debt, that doesn't result into construction of new roads.
Right.
So I have this sense that the Capex increase, which has happened, is not fully well directed. Some Capex and significant Capex has gone into Air India, more than that in BSNL.
Right.
BSNL is another story of losing customers.
Right.
So who is that capital investment serving? We don't know. Right. And there is one more thing which has actually taken the sheen off the Capex increase in budget, which is that earlier many of these investments were being done by the concerned companies themselves. For example, Railway was also borrowing from the market and making Capex. The NHAI was borrowing from the market and making Capex. And what we call the public sector Capex, or internal and extra budgetary resources of these companies. So they get from the budget. They also raise from the market. So what they were raising from the market has actually reduced over last 5 years. And taken together, the Capex growth is not very, very high.
Interesting.
So, and the last set of infrastructure investment where the government has not played much role, the digital infrastructure, I think where the private sector is in the driver's seat, I think that's doing reasonably well. So whether it's the data centers establishment or laying down the telecom networks and other things. So I think that's happening fairly well. So of the three kinds of infrastructure story for last 10 years, personal infrastructure, I think, very well done.
Right.
The physical infrastructure is not so well done, and especially hopelessly done in case of railways.
Right.
And the digital infrastructure, being in the private sector, is doing these things.
You know, the public capex, especially in the railways, is something.
Absolutely, we should watch for this. This is nation
Right.
must examine whether it's worth making such investments.
Right. Huge investments happening, and still you're not seeing that translation into either. Many passengers using those service. Even and वो दिखता भी नहीं. Even friction wise, you still see same challenges in booking the tickets.
Correct.
Right. Same the experience even while traveling hasn't significantly improved.
Yeah.